Yeah. Welcome to this week's podcast. It is the 10th of October 2019, and I am one of your hosts, Byron Pace. My brother Daryl is not here again this week because he is currently on a plane on his way back from Tanzania, having been filming and taking stills there over the last 2 weeks. I know that we will catch up with what he has been up to in the intro of a podcast very, very soon. I am not in Scotland. I am over in Montana. I've been working alongside Tyler Sharp for the last week, who is editor-in-chief of Modern Huntsman, and of course, the partner of this podcast. We've been busy working on Volume 4. Believe it or not, we are on Volume 4, and very, very soon you're going to be able to pre-order Volume 4, so keep your eye out on the Modern Huntsman website and on our website, thepacebrothers.com, to very, very soon be able to pre-order Volume 4. It's an all-women volume. We're showcasing great women from around the world in the outdoors, conservation, hunting, and fishing space. And I've had the great privilege of spending some time with some of the women who are guest editors of this volume. I'll be working alongside them this week. And in fact, you're going to hear from one of them right now. Jess Johnson. I'm not even going to give you an inkling of what the story is about because she gives a rundown of what she writes about in Volume 4. But it's an intriguing conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And as you get to the end of this podcast, she probably gives me one of the greatest quotes I've heard in a very, very long time. I think my life has been changed by listening to it. Well, it certainly made me feel a lot better after feeling a little bit jaded with the whole hunting and conservation space right now because we seem to be under increasing amount of attacks. Kind of hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel sometimes. I have an apology to make because 2 weeks ago I completely forgot to give you the animal sound. And I forgot probably because my brother wasn't here and I was doing the intro by myself, and he's normally the person that remembers such things. So there's nothing I can do about that, but I can give you an animal sound for this week. Now, it's not going to be tied to a competition to win a copy of Modern Huntsman like we always do. You're going to hear about that next and how you can win a copy of Modern Huntsman and a Spartan Precision bipod. But first up, just for fun, here's your animal noise for this week's podcast. So if you think you know what that is, hit us up on social media, on Instagram, or send us an email, or on Facebook, and in 2 weeks' time we will tell you and see if you managed to get it right. For the last 2 shows, we've been asking you all a very, very important question, and that is, if you were to give money to an organization which does proper, on-the-ground conservation work, who would it be? And the reason we've been asking that question is because our friends at Spartan Precision asked us that question. They want to give 2% of their profits to conservation, and they don't know where that money should go. They would like to keep the money in the UK, but if we can't come up with a good answer to this question, then they're very happy to put it where it makes the most difference, even if it's outside of the UK, which is the country that they're based. And so we've been asking all of our podcast listeners to suggest organizations who are doing really great work and making a difference in the conservation space. In return for your suggestions, we are giving you the opportunity to win not only Volume 3 of Modern Huntsman, but also a Spartan Precision bipod. If you don't know about Spartan Precision and the innovation in the industry with regards to bipods and tripods for rifle shooting, and actually now cameras as well, go and just Google Spartan Precision, check them out. I've known Rob Gearing, the owner of the company, since the very, very beginning when it was actually not even in production. He's got a great team there and he's an awesome guy. He's been on the podcast before talking about his equipment, so you can actually go back and listen to our chat with Rob Gearing. I think if I remember rightly, we recorded it in a very noisy hall in Iwer in Nuremberg in Germany. But you can go and hear what he's about. And if you want even a little bit more insight into his family, we did a tremendous podcast with Jenna Gearing probably about 12 months ago. So you can go and check that one out as well. So tell us what you think. Where should his company, Spartan Precision, put their 2% profits? And I think probably on the next podcast, or certainly within the next 2 podcasts, we're going to collate all the suggestions together. We'll mention them on the show, and we'll try and pick a winner. So lastly, before we get into the show, I need to say a big thank you to our top tier patrons, who include James Marchington, South Ayrshire Stalking, John Henry Pete, Chris Griffiths, Richard Stevens, and Ronnie Speakman of rdcontracting.co.uk. If you would like to support the show, just head over to Patreon, look up the Pace Brothers, and there's a whole bunch of tiers and different ways that you can support us to create these podcasts. There's even a $1 option now. So open for everybody, and we'll even give you something in return. We really do appreciate your support. So with no further delay, I give you Jess Johnson. Jess, welcome to the Into the Wilderness podcast. The 3 of us are sitting in Montana, and the third person is not my brother because he's somewhere deep in Tanzania. You're replacing him, Tyler. Mr. Sharp, welcome back to the show.
I'm your American brother, Brother Bear. Yes, thanks for having me. Glad you're back in Montana with
I'm glad to be back.
Some fall season, so you'll get to see some new stuff. Hopefully do some fishing too, some hunting. We'll see.
The mountains were beautiful coming in on the plane.
So this is the best time of year to be in the West.
Yeah.
Well, you got some big boots to fill since, you're Daryl today. Well, I hope you've got some little sharp jokes.
I'll work on my Scottish slang. I'm good at making fun of people on social media, so I think I can take a couple jabs like he does.
Okay, good.
We miss you, Daryl.
We got together last night with a whole heap of people who are involved in the next volume of Modern Huntsman, Volume 4. Now, we're going to do a whole podcast on this, but just as a couple of sentences, tell the good people who listen to the show, who should all be very well aware of our partnership with Modern Huntsman and the podcast now. What's in store for them, just in a couple of sentences?
So, we're doing a women's issue. And the last thing that I wanted to do was a women's issue and pretend like I know what the hell I'm talking about. So I hired 4 women editors, Jess Johnson, who we're here with now, Nicole Qualtieri, former Lindsay Elliott, now Lindsay Brown Davis, and Katie Marchetti. And they've helped me sort of shape and steer the different demographics, ages, regions, topics, women from all over the world that we want to feature and to showcase a wide variety of perspectives in the hunting and fishing and just outdoor communities. And it's been incredibly inspiring. And I feel like I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting back and listening to the conversations. And so last night, we all got together and had a little wild game dinner.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And it was kind of fun because we've been having conference calls for 6 weeks, and Jess and I had never met.
I hadn't met anybody in the room.
Exactly.
But everyone's voice I'd heard at some point on a call.
Right. So it was pretty cool just to get everybody together in the same place at the same time and in a non-work environment and have some laughs and some drinks and plan the road ahead.
Jess, what's the process been like for you so far? Have you been enjoying it?
Oh, I've been really enjoying it. I think inspiring is an understatement for the amount of interest and stories that are coming in. And, when we have these discussions about, we're writing pieces around all these amazing women, there's always other women that other stories about other women. And I feel like you could do 9 books with everything that has come out. But
I would dare say it won't be the last one. And it's not like there isn't there hasn't been women contributing to all the other volumes of Modern Huntsman, but this was just, you wanted to dedicate it.
Yeah, it was one of those things where even in, we've always had women contributors, but we wanted to have more, right? And I think
we're the same with the podcast. I was thinking this the other day because it is the conservation and hunting and fishing space has historically been very male dominated. I think that it's shifting.
Yeah.
And I'm very conscious of the fact that most of our guests are male, but that's just by virtue of the fact of the percentage of people involved in this sort of world that we discuss. So I'm super excited that this week I think it's all my guests are going to be women in the field.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's from
you. I mean,
I'm a woman at heart. A part of Modern Huntsman from the beginning, right, has been to focus on individuals and organizations and stories that don't necessarily get the mic or mainstream attention a lot. And so I think in that same spirit, once we kind of dug into that, we're like, well, wow, there's a lot of badass women out there that nobody knows who they are, or maybe they don't even have social media, or they've just done amazing things. I mean, I've spent, been coming out here for 10 years and we had never met, and I had never heard so much about what she does and the Artemis Sportswoman and all of that. And so to just, now that we've opened that can, I feel like we need to start a second publication.
So Jess, how did you get in contact with Tyler? How did that work? The sort of the Modern Huntsman hookup in the first time.
Tyler, I think you reached out to me, but I think Becca Frucht was maybe who connected the dots, because I kept hearing whisperings of Modern Huntsman's Volume 4 being an all female edition.
Feeding through the grapevine. Yeah, that is this small international community.
It was amazing, because it did and everybody was like, Artemis has to reach out. You guys have to, you and Tyler and I hadn't met, and I'd been a big fan of the other Modern Huntsmans, especially because I'd noticed that there were women in it, and from I think Volume 1 and on, and I thought that was a standalone, and I had a lot of respect for that. So as this sort of started shaking out, everybody kept being like, "Oh my gosh, you guys have to connect! You have to connect!" And Tyler made the first phone call, which was pretty funny because I was sitting in the middle of a Game and Fish Commission meeting in Wyoming, and I got a text from Becca, and she was like, "I think Tyler's going to call you. Just pick up a number if you don't know it." And stepped away and was like, "Oh, I'll just hop on the phone with him real quick." And I think cut to an hour and 45 minutes later.
It was almost a 2-hour conversation.
It was amazing though, and I was sitting there "Oh, this is." It wasn't a bad hour and 45-minute conversation. It was that kind of thing where you look down, you're like, "Oh God, I've probably just taken up his entire day."
That's good though. I mean, obviously there was something that was clicking.
Yeah, I think we have very similar. Just approach things very similarly, and I really appreciated that. It was a good conversation to start out on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about your background. I mean, I heard there were so many people here last night that it's all kind of mixed up for me. But for people listening, how have what has your life been like to this point that has given you the background that is now taking you to being involved in Modern Huntsman?
Oh, I think I had a diverse background.
You're from Montana.
Originally, yeah. I actually moved around a lot as a kid. I probably had a childhood that looked a lot like an Army kid's childhood, but my parents were ranch managers, and my dad was a reclamation rancher, which he would come onto ranches that were run down and beat up and not ecologically balanced, and bring them back into that sort of functioning working ranch that was not hard on the ecology around it. So I grew up in a conservation mindset with a ranch kid. I'm an only child, and moved around Montana, Wyoming, very northern California. So kind of ran the gambit of the West, and then got the very far West side of it, and then sort of moved away from that and was a dancer and wanting to go to school for ballet. And
oh wow.
Took a hard turn there and ended up back in Wyoming as a bow hunter. And
how did you go from ballet to bow hunting?
It was a surprisingly easy jump. Ballet and bow hunting are very similar. I think the disciplines and the muscle groups and the sort of same zone of brain was something that I just found very similar, and wasn't going to be dancing professionally. And so came back out west because my parents were managing a ranch in Wyoming, and I was scratching my head, what was I doing inside in California, when I can be here in Wyoming? What was I was, and kind of brought me back to the outdoors, and it just fit, I got to be around wildlife, I got to be in incredible places, and then I also had this discipline of bow hunting, and that kind of led into the conservation realm, which I'd always grown up in, and I had always been a part of my life, but
through the work that your dad was doing.
My dad and my mom, yeah.
I'm intrigued by that though, because that's, at the time, I'm talking about when you were a kid, and that's what your parents were doing. Surely that wasn't the main focus of ranching. Because that seems like something that's talked about a lot now to me here in the West in terms of the ecological balance. But surely then it was just making money out of the land with...
It was right at the tail end. Ranching has gone through, I think a phase where it was right at the tail end of the old knowledge of ranching, where it was very ecologically balanced, and people knew that if you took care of the land, you had a healthier everything. How that knowledge was lost is surprising to me, but it was.
So there was a much sort of longer term view taken.
Much longer term, and it wasn't in but then you go through how the market crashed around cattle, and people got hard up, and it was they needed money now, and that as everything changed with that, ranching changed, and then with technology and the fact that it wasn't done on horseback much anymore, and there's a whole other this new ranching with the ease of technology, which still doesn't make ranching easy, but it makes it easier than it was. it's relearning how to find that ecological balance. And a lot of these ranches went through, changing of family hands, because if you're in a family ranch and your kid doesn't want to ranch, it goes away.
Yeah. So eventually you're old and you sell it.
Yeah, and then that knowledge is lost. The knowledge of like how to cycle pastures, or where the cows hang out in the fall, and that's all lost and has to be relearned either by a new owner who is often not from a ranching background, or from someone who is from a ranching background, but it's still a learning process. And so it grew. My dad was active not just in the ranching world. When we were in California, Nestle tried to build a 1 million square foot water bottling plant on the McCloud River.
Okay.
And the McCloud City Council signed a 100-year contract for an unlimited draw on groundwater. And
Unlimited.
And because it was a depressed community that was looking for something to boost.
So they were looking for an economic boost.
Yeah, and Dad and a couple other, he's a big fly fisherman, and a couple of his fly fishing buddies got wind of it, and actually it was a 9-year fight, and they beat Nestle. They got out, they beat them.
That's unreal.
And it was and I was, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. So growing up, and didn't have a concept really how amazing that was, that my dad was part of that and did that. And
Took
now
it to
looking back,
wow.
Yeah, and won, and that was just normal for me. And now looking back and doing the job that I do now, which is a lot of work similar to that, but he did it on a volunteer basis.
Yeah.
It's humbling to be from folks like that.
The amazing thing is there, and this is something we talk about quite a bit, is that whatever you think of hunting and fishing from the outside, if you don't partake in it, it requires a vested interest in the thing, whether it be the species or the river system, for people to do things like that, to dedicate a massive part of their life to make a difference. He was a fisherman, and that was his vested interest. There are a lot of people who like looking at rivers or walking along rivers, but are they going to put 9 years of their life aside to take the good fight if they don't have a real vested interest in sort of utilizing that resource? And probably not.
He just loved that area. And, the McCloud River is a blue ribbon trout river.
I've
it's
even
amazing.
Heard of it, yeah.
It's, the ranch that we were managing was right on the banks of the McCloud River. It was beautiful. And we had a bunch of really beautiful creeks that had been worn down by stock and just not well banked. And Dad went, and I think it was 13 miles of the Squaw Creek that he rebuilt the stream bed for fish habitat and stuff, like on the ranch. So it was very but that was part of his job. He has the folks that bought these ranches, he got their buy-in, to spend the money to do this, to bring these places back. And I think that was what was so cool, is it wasn't just, Dad going and doing it. He brought it to the attention of the folks that owned this place, and they had buy-in with it.
So the private owners were they were alongside.
Yep.
So
And
they're not necessarily doing the work, but they were providing the funding to allow this to happen.
Yeah, and so you'd have to go and be like, I want to do this project that's rebuilding 13 miles of stream bed,
which costs money.
Which costs a lot of money,
yeah.
And to get them to understand it. Luckily, the people that own the place in McCloud were very big fly fishermen as well.
Okay,
so that was an easy sell for, I think, Dad to do.
That's amazing. Yeah, we do. We have very similar programs at home on the Fisheries Trust that I'm on, which is a huge series of river systems. But a lot of that is almost all of it is collaborating with private landowners to do exactly that sort of thing, where you have unfenced river edges, which have they're just completely eroded and falling into the riverbank, silting up into the riverbed, silting up spawning beds just from cattle.
Yeah,
so it's about talking to them, working out, finding bits of funding from somewhere, tying it in with private funding as well, and trying to find these synergies of interest so that the overall ecosystem can be improved.
Well,
and it can be a hard fight sometimes, because not every landowner is really invested in it that much. They're looking at their Excel
Their
spreadsheet and the bottom line.
Yeah, but most of them are, and where a lot of the work I do in Wyoming right now is around migration corridors. So we have these long, 150-mile migrations that mule deer are doing, and all the science is coming out about it. And it's not an instinctual migration; it's a taught one. So these animals, it's led by the sort of matriarchal doe of the family herd, and she has this inherent knowledge that she learned from her mother and passes that down. And so you imagine, like, if we're disturbing these, it doesn't take long to lose a migration because you lose the knowledge real quick. It's not instinctual. If you transplant a deer somewhere else, it's not like they just know to like head north. They're following this green up, but a lot of what we're finding is these migration corridors are presenting a land management nightmare right now.
Because they're across multiple lands.
Because it's public land, state land, private land, townships. It's all this like very confusing. People are trying to figure out, how do we protect this without stepping on other folks' toes. And the private landowners have been absolutely integral in it, because they are the reason most of these migrations still exist, because they have these large tracts of land that they haven't developed and they haven't broken up, and it's stayed in this like big long, I think they said nearly 40% of the migration is private land. I could be wrong on that. I'll have to check that number, but it's a lot of this migration route is private. And a lot of the folks and the ranchers around this, I think ranching unintendedly got, I think, a bad rap in this big public lands push that happened in America.
I was just going to say that to you, that what you've just said there is not the perception that I would say the rest of the world has about the view in North America on private land.
Yeah,
the perception is that you guys all think it's terrible.
Yeah, and the perception, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think a lot of folks don't understand private land and how the private land owners have worked for a long time in the conservation. Obviously, it's not everyone. There's bad apples and everything.
Bad people who hunt, or in any walk of life.
Exactly, but there are folks that have been on the ground and been doing this, and have been the reason that we have a lot of these things still in place. And it's been a sort of sad unintended consequence from the amazing public land push, and this, we are very lucky that we have this. We talk about it a lot, but I think this recognition of the private landowner would go a long way into making sure that our conservation work is accepted at the legislative and policy level too, in states like Wyoming and Montana. It's kind of vilified private
landowners. That's certainly how I perceive it. I mean, I know it to be incorrect, that perception,
but I think it's a true one. Yeah,
that's the view from the outside.
Yeah, and it's a sad one that has changed like that, because it's not the case. I think when you really get on the ground and you see who's doing the work, and they've been at the table a lot longer than the public land crowd.
So we kind of skipped ahead a bit. So explain what it is that you do now. 'Cause you're giving us insights, but what is your day to day?
So
it's obviously not just bow hunting and being interested in these things.
Someday that'll be the case.
You wish it could be.
My paid job is for the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, and so it's the oldest hunting and angling conservation group in the state of Wyoming. We're 82 years old, been around since 1937, and we're not a species specific and less of a boots on the ground organization. We are at the very nuanced and wonky level of policy and laws and resource management plans, like on the ground management with public land agencies. And most of my work is the legislative stuff. So I am their lobbyist. I spend the entire state legislative session as one of the only hunters in the state of Wyoming voices down there.
That's a big responsibility.
Lobbying for wildlife and anything that would be remotely interesting or touch on anything that hunters or anglers would care about. So that goes, everything to wildlife crossings and migration corridors to regulations and the authority for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department to make decisions on their own. And it's there's maybe 6 of us down there that are working any angle of conservation. There's a lot of great non-hunting organizations that are down there as well.
And you work in collaboration with them?
Sometimes when we,
Where are there synergies?
Yeah,
Do you find that, Wyoming, is that tough? Is there Are they willing to work alongside people who kill stuff?
Absolutely. Oh, they're amazing.
That's not a problem
the
here.
problem is that to associate with a quote unquote green group in the state of Wyoming is political suicide at the legislature.
Okay.
You can't, I may agree with a lot of what folks are saying from different groups, but hunters and anglers are perceived conservative, and Wyoming is a very, very, we are the Trump state. We are very red, and it's a very Republican legislature, and we have power down there because as hunters, we are perceived very conservative. And to help make sure that that stays there, we don't, regardless of how much we agree with them, we very rarely partner with conservation groups that have a more liberal leaning. And it's frustrating that is a game that you have to play.
But I mean, I understand the politics of it.
Yeah.
And we have similar parallels at home, where there might be groups or individuals who, for the most part, might disagree with the hunting or fishing side, whatever it might be. But every now and then they come up with something like, well, there's no reason why we can't support that.
Yeah.
Because we totally agree. Declines of songbirds or whatever, something that's nothing to do with hunting, but might have implications to do with land use and agriculture. And there's no reason why we can't support doing a better job of conserving these species, but they won't do it.
Yeah.
Because yesterday, that person or that group is doing something which is really damaging to the hunting space. But I am of the opinion that, well, can you imagine how off guard they would be?
Yeah.
Like, we want to help you on this because, we might disagree on many things, but we agree on this.
That's happening right now in Wyoming, and it's happening around wildlife crossings.
Okay.
Wyoming hits a huge amount of deer, antelope, and elk on our roads with cars, and it is a public safety issue. It is a conservation issue. It's a hunter and angler issue. Everybody in Wyoming has experienced hitting something on the road, and the problem here is like, okay, well, we have the answer, and it's these, it's whether it's a land bridge or it's underpasses or it's fencing. The problem is that, we even have a task force that's picked out the 40 areas in the state of Wyoming that are the most problematic right now. And so we have a priority list of 10, and to look at that, the problem is the price tag is, if we wanted to do all of that, it's $256 million just to build it, not even just to maintain, but for 10 projects.
Initial capital investment.
And so this is a problem where everybody's like, yeah, we agree this is a problem. Like, we're all on the same page. This is like oil and gas is standing next to conservation, is standing next to hunting and angling, is standing next to the ag community, saying we agree and this is a problem. But the solution is we have to find more money in a boom and bust economy, and Wyoming is not in the boom right now. And so it's a funding issue, but it is like it's so refreshing. And we all in the office love when we get to work on crossings, because we're like, yay, we get to agree with everyone and we don't have to fight people.
So if there's any Patreon supporters out there with an extra $256 million,
you would be a good place to put it.
Yeah, this would be a good.
I'm sure we'll find it. Maybe probably give us a week after this podcast goes out. Well, I think we're going to put this podcast out next week.
Yeah.
So
who knows?
By the end of the month, we should sort that.
Well, that'll be easy. Wait, but then I need something else that we all agree on. So it does give me like the light at the end of the tunnel. But it's an amazing thing how often you have to battle for things that for me feel very inherent. Like, yeah, this is too precious to lose. But you have to explain that to someone that doesn't see eye to eye with you. And sometimes finding that middle ground is not easy.
So if publicly you can't, on certain topics, you can't be seen to supporting the sort of environmental green left, behind the scenes you know these people because you're sitting in meetings with them all the time. Are you able to have more pragmatic conversations with them behind the scenes, like not officially?
Oh, absolutely. One of my best friends works for essentially what my job capacity is, but for an organization that's a non-hunting organization. She is a hunter.
Right.
Yeah. And she's amazing. And, I think everybody gets along. It's just understanding the strategy that works at the political level. But everyone's friends, even like we all get out of a meeting and go have like likely one too many beers together afterwards.
That's when most problems are solved.
Yeah, it's amazing, but it is legislatively, it's an interesting game you have to play.
It seems it's such a shame that clearly, without the political implications over and above that, it seems like a lot of these problems could be solved much more easily if you didn't have to be concerned about that.
Well, and it's the willingness to listen. I think a lot of us, we get so, when you work in conservation, you're so used to losing.
Yeah.
It's not
a game. That's a sad statement, isn't it?
It is. It's a very sad statement, but you're just used to not. And so you end up drawing lines in the sand right out of the gate, like not an inch. I will not budge. It's wilderness or nothing, or this or nothing. And the problem is that's not a conversation that is conducive to having being solved.
Yeah, it can't move in any direction.
It can't move in any direction. So you have these folks that are very passionate about what they do that go out and draw a line in the sand. And then, you have the other side of the argument, which is valid, which is, I always look at conservation. Conservation is a long-term discussion. Conservation is looking at 500 years from now. The problem is what we're up against is short-term. What we're up against is do I have food on my table? Do I have a job? Can I send my kids to college? Do I have a roof over my head? And to do that, I need the oil and gas industry in the state of Wyoming, or I need this, and
then your politics turn around just the same as most countries in the world, and democratic is so fast, it's 4 or 5 years or whatever it is. So there's your short-term view. Whereas you need when we say this all the time, it's hundreds of years.
Yeah, and you're sitting here I can't argue with your need to have food on the table. I understand that, and you need to have a job, and the state needs to have an economy, and our schools need funding. All these very right in our face issues. The thing is that it's hard to talk about the long-term view that without conservation, we won't be around in 500 years to have these in-your-face issues. And so to have that long-term versus short-term discussion and be able to move the needle at all in the long-term way, because you're having to have this conversation about do you have food on your table? Can you send your kids to school? That's a really tough one to be able to navigate and find any kind of ground on.
Yeah, it is. It's a global problem though. Yeah, not just. It's
this cultural separation of I always feel like I come out of hunting season, I'm like, oh man, I've been in the real world for a while, because I've been my primary concerns was I was out, was I safe? Did I have food? Was I sleeping at night? And then I come back into the cultural world, I'm like, oh yeah, bills and things.
Adulting.
Yeah, adulting.
Well, Byron, I don't know if you had it on your list, but I definitely want you to talk a little bit about Artemis and what that is and how that started and what people should know about it.
Yeah.
So Artemis is a women's hunting and angling initiative or program that is housed underneath the National Wildlife Federation. But it came about because the National Wildlife Federation, I think for the first time in most hunting and angling groups, saw that they needed to put their money where their mouth was when they were talking about diversity. Hunting is predominantly white and male. I think that's something to pretty blatantly be able to say. And women's involvement in hunting has been on an uptick, but it's only going to get to a certain point before I think it peters off if we don't start seeing role models or folks that are out there leading and talking about this, because until it's normalized, it's always going to be a standalone. We're always going to be like, oh my gosh, you're a woman and you're a hunter. And it shouldn't
really be a discussion point.
It shouldn't be a discussion.
It should be just
be like, oh yeah, you hunt. Artemis came about in this sense of wanting to model that normalization and having women that were willing to lead in the conservation space and lead in the hunting space and lead in the industry space, and not having those three separate, but having those three be a synonymous thought. Hunting should not be looked at as a right. Hunting is a privilege, and we can lose it if we don't take care of what we're doing, whether it's how we're perceived to the non-hunting public, to how we take care of our resources in the conservation realm. And the female voice is so different right now in the industry and resonates differently than the male voice, just because it's a new voice. Diversity in a topic strengthens a topic. So the more voices you have speaking, saying something essentially the same, but in different ways, the more people you're going to have that listen and understand. And And so we wanted to make this normalization of female leadership and in the conservation space, and Artemis is sort of what happened out of that. And it's named after the Greek goddess of the hunt.
Of course, yeah.
But what I love about her, and what we found out later, is she's the goddess of birth and the goddess of death, and has this very like yin and yang. And I love that representation when you start talking about hunting. Because to talk about the life that goes into hunting is the conservation discussion, and then the hunting is the killing discussion, and it's got both. But the National Wildlife Federation had reached out to me, and I was working at the Wyoming Wildlife Federation at that time, and they asked if I was willing to help them create this and come on, and I was, a phone call that changed my life.
So how long ago was that?
4 years, 3 years, 3.5 years about. Yeah.
So you that was a creation from scratch, just from concept.
Yes.
So what does it look like today? Like who's involved in it? What do you do?
We hired our first paid staff member, Marcia Brownlee. She lives up in Missoula, Montana, and is quite like one of the most amazing women. She embodies what we wanted Artemis to be, and it was amazing that we found her and she was willing to work for us. But now I have stepped back into more of an advisory board, and I get to just sit back and watch this grow. Remember those initial discussions on the phone and being like, what do I want to see out of this? And what do you wish it would become? And it was, now I'm getting to see what it has become, which is women are calling from around the country and even out of the country to want to be a part of this and to be ambassadors, and to learn more and to do more, and are reaching out on whether it's how to talk to your decision makers at the policy level, to removing fence or boots on the ground kind of things. And I think women have been looking for a place to put this energy, and no hunting group has marketed to them. You look at all these amazing groups that are doing all this great work, but until recently, all of their materials are like male centric. And so when you're speaking to the man is going to be the one that responds to it. And the woman, we might come along, but when you don't feel included in a conversation, it's hard to like put a bunch of effort into it. And when Artemis came out, Outside Online did a story on us, and it was like someone turned on a fire hose, and we were holding the end going, I don't know what to do with this. But it was amazing, and it's just has not slacked off. It's just been this, the fire hose is still turned on, and we're still figuring out how to like wrangle all of this incredible interest, because like women are coming out of the woodworks going, this is amazing, I want to do more.
See, for me, beyond it being a platform for females within this outdoor space, the thing that grabs me most about this conversation is it's not just a club where women come together and go hunting or talk hunting or whatever. You're actually doing stuff.
Our first thing we did as Artemis.
This is about action on the ground.
Yeah,
it's not just about hunting.
Our first action was a trip to DC. The first thing we ever did as a cohesive group was go to DC and lobby on some bills that were there.
That's incredible.
So for our UK listeners,
I think we got something to learn
Washington, D.C., the capital of the U.S.,
Yeah.
And so, obviously people are familiar with the term lobby, but in this case, what does that actually mean? What were you guys?
We flew there and we sat down with our congressmen and senators, so the decision makers, and we were asking for certain votes on bills. Some of them are bills that are still being worked, like the Recovering America's Wildlife Act and things that are coming through. But we were there on behalf of working on public lands and making sure they understood the value of public lands to hunters, especially in the access side. In the West, and then to funding for wildlife agencies, and just sitting down with them. And one, I think many of our decision makers were shocked that there were women in the room that were talking hunting to them. That was, I think, a new experience for many of them, except for maybe the Wyoming guys, because they're used to everyone hunting in the state. But whether it was the Pennsylvania senator or a senator from Oregon, and sitting down and being like, hey, this is important. And we had, I think it was 6 women that came, and it was from all Western states, but it was pretty, I was proud that was the first thing we did, because I didn't want it to just be a club where women got together, which is nice that the networking has come from that, but it's been conservation and action first. And it's not, I don't ever want it to come off as a man-hating club. It's always been...
That's not what I'm feeling from that.
But we've always been very, we have some wonderful men that have been part of Artemis. We call them our Artemen.
Artemen. That's great.
But they're it's the recognition that, this is just a place, to support women and to put women at the forefront. It doesn't mean it's only women.
Well, and something we talked about was, a lot of times with Modern Huntsman, we're trying to make hunting approachable for people who don't have a point of access. And so in your case, right, there's a lot of women who might have interest in it, but there has never been an access point for them to get interested in it. So the fact that you've now been such a huge part of creating that kind of makes sense with the fire hose metaphor there. Yeah.
It was amazing. And I've had the privilege to hunt with so many new women hunters in the last 3 years that have never gone out and been able to take women out that have never been. And, I was very lucky. I learned to hunt, and I'm an adult onset hunter. So I didn't grow up hunting, but I learned to hunt about 10 years ago, and I had a great mentor. But I think a lot of that's unique. I think mentorship, and especially for women, has been difficult to come by. One, because it's not always comfortable for a woman to learn from a man, especially if it's a significant other. That just is, you just don't do that.
It's a difficult one.
That's grounds for divorce.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a stigma around it going out if it's not your significant other. And so, but it's been really to open that door and to see women taking women. I've taken men out that they've never been hunting. It's opening a new door, and it's just a different access point. And it's been really amazing to have happen.
Yeah, that's one thing I've learned through this issue is most of the women like Jess out here are way more experienced than you and I in terms of out in the field, just the stuff they've endured.
I was listening to the conversations last night. I was just like, I got nothing to input here. I'm just going to listen to what you have to say.
That's been the experience through this whole thing, is that they just have so many amazing experiences and things to share that, you meet someone like Jess and your first guess would not be, oh, did you just come back from a crazy backcountry DIY sheep hunt was it Alaska or was it Canada?
It was the Northwest Territories of Canada. It was guided, but it was, 20 days in the Northwest Territories of Canada.
That's a long hunt.
Sheep country. It was probably 12 days of hunting and 3.5 days on either side of travel because it's so far north.
Yeah. What was it like? Were you successful?
We got a doll sheep. It was unbelievable. My friend Bridget, who I went with, had the sheep tag and shot the sheep, and it was country you just would not. I still am struggling to find words around. I wrote a piece on it on this. Bridget and I wrote a piece. It's our field journal, in this Modern Huntsman Volume 4. So the stories.
This is a teaser now.
Yeah. So and because my sister said this last night, when you brought she brought some doll sheep for us, and my sister made this face like, well, what do you, like a sheep? So for someone who maybe isn't familiar with the species, it's not a domestic sheep. Give us a little bit of background on what this animal is, where it lives, and how you got to get to it.
So the scientific name is Ovis dolly, which I love. I think it's one of the most beautiful scientific names out there. And it is of a sheep species, yes. But these are wild sheep. They're called thin horns. So you have bighorn sheep, in the American West, and then thin horns, and then you have the longer horn ones, which I don't know what they fall under. I think they're Argali, in the European side. And Ovis dolly is a white sheep that lives at the top parts of mountains in Canada and Alaska. And they are just so of that place. If you can imagine a sheep that is living on top of a castle of rocks with maybe 6 blades of grass, howling wind, and winters that are 6 months long.
It's like nothing should live up there.
Nothing should live up there, but they do, and they thrive, and they're athletes. That was what blew me away, is these sheep, are scaling things that takes humans, with thumbs and hands, ropes to get up.
Yeah.
And these sheep just
it's
bop on up there, and it was we'd start at the bottom of these mountains, and it'd be 3,000 feet, and we'd end up at the top at 6.5, 7.5, and it was just every day of climbing mountains with trekking poles and footing that turns your stomach. I mean, there was many hikes where I had to stop in the middle and talk myself out of a little bit of panic because of how bad the footing was, and then just keep going. But it's
only a few steps away from dying.
Yeah, I mean, it's one step.
One step away from dying. Yeah.
one bad step, and that was never far from my thought process. But sheep hunting is such a stigma. American hunters, and I don't know if this is the case in the UK too, but it's such a it's the hunt. Doll sheep hunting is the one where people that's the badass hunt. And
is this because of the physical effort that's required?
I think it's because of where they're at. And I thought about that because they're great. They're amazing animals. But had we not shot a sheep on this hunt, I don't know that I would feel any differently about how successful and epic and amazing that hunt was. And it was the landscape.
I actually asked you, my question was actually quite shit because was it successful? And when I asked you that question, I was meaning, did you kill something? But as we often have the discussion, success, it can be defined in so many ways. And I know exactly what you're talking about because so many of the hunts that I go on, I don't even have a gun with me. I'm there with other people. I feel like you were there.
Yeah.
And the success is in the experience.
It was amazing. I had a mountain caribou tag, which was equally as crazy because they end up in the same place as Doll sheep do. And
I
mountain
didn't think caribou went that high.
I didn't either until I was up there and we were skinning the sheep and I was like, that's caribou poop. These caribou go into many of the places the sheep do.
Are they a different subspecies to the more lowland caribou?
Yeah, so they're mountain. I think there's mountain caribou, there's barren ground, there's tundra, there's woodland, and the mountain caribou are the largest of the species. And they are well named. They are mountain dwelling animals, and they were right at the top with the sheep. There's caribou trails all over. And Bridget went with a rifle and I went with a bow. And so I was attempting to archery hunt a mountain caribou.
That's hardcore.
It was amazing. I got very close, but did not connect. But it was, again, I was 20 yards from a mountain caribou that was looking me in the eye, and I had never seen a caribou before. And it was every small part of my brain was exploding at that point. So.
What an incredible experience. It's a part of the world that I've always wanted to go.
Yeah.
And on those hunts, mainly because of the places, it gives you purpose to go to places that you would otherwise never go.
I never thought I would be able to go. I didn't even know enough about it. Was so out of the realm of possibility because of price of hunt, how costly it is to get there. The hunts cost a lot, that it was not in the realm of possibility for me to go. So I never thought about it, and I never wanted to really, it was like a bucket list thing where oh yeah, I also want a pink unicorn,
Is that also on your bucket list?
Now it is.
Talk to Becca Frucht about that.
Yeah, right. But this hunt was a gift.
Oh, wow.
A friend of mine won this at the sheep show. So a big convention around wild sheep, and won it in a $40 raffle ticket.
What? And
it was a hunt for 2 people. And I had not met her when she won this hunt, and a year later I met her, and we connected over Artemis and talking about women in these spaces. And I told a story about losing an elk, and I told it in a public space, and we talked about what that was like. And 2 weeks later, she got down on one knee with a bullet in her hand and asked me to go on this hunt with her.
That's amazing.
And she was not a hunter at that point. She a totally new hunter, and ended up not being able to go. And so then I got to get down on one knee with a bullet in my hand and ask Bridget,
That's amazing,
who ended up going with me to go. And it was this story of women gifting women these unbelievable hunts. And it was a really,
that's really special.
It was a very special trip. And again, wildly out of the realm of possibility had it not been gifted.
I don't think that would go over so well if that was a guy doing that and getting down on one knee and handing a woman a bullet. What the hell is this? Anyways, that's so cool. You didn't tell me that.
That's photos around it. Paul Kemper was actually there.
Okay.
And he was with us when Caitlin did that. And he has maybe 30 photos of me going from surprise to full meltdown. And I think it's I have one photo where I'm smiling and laughing, and all the rest are my head's between my knees and I'm crying. So there's no way this is real. But yeah, there are photos of that, but the Instagram conversation around that, it really went to show how people don't actually read the comments.
Yeah.
Because the photo I put up was one of Caitlin down on one knee and like me with a surprised face.
Okay. I can see where this is going.
It was very, there was a couple times where we had to get him like, guys, read the story.
Yeah. Yeah. I say that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now that you've done it, you're going to have a big problem.
It's
you're going to
awful.
have to go back.
I have to go back. It's a terrible, terrible thing.
Yeah. This is what I say to the people who I take hunting in Africa for the first time. So my warning to this experience is that once you go, you're forever going to want to go back, and you will go to crazy ends to make that happen.
Yeah,
I'm trying to figure out like how many body parts I can sell and still go up there.
You've
and
still
be
got
able
4
to
limbs. I'm looking at you right now.
I know, right?
You only need. I don't know.
Like one.
Well, you can lose an arm to climb the mountain.
Yeah, if the goats don't have it, you don't need it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the sheep,
Trade them out for hooves. You probably are better in that country.
Yeah, so have you even started the thought process of how you might get back there?
Oh, I was
lots of $40 raffle tags.
I was writing down as I was leaving, like thoughts of like, the sheep hunt was amazing, and I think it's something that will stick with me forever. What I want to do is I want to go back and caribou hunt, and I want to do it with a bow, and I want to go get a large, like good representation of a species, bull mountain caribou, and I became obsessed with how like the caribou really are the lifeblood of that place. Like the sheep are amazing. They're at the tops of these mountains. The caribou are all over. And the trails are these veins through this landscape. And the caribou are just this like thriving life pulse through this whole place. And they're bizarre. They are not like any deer species that I have ever hunted. And so it was a completely different hunt. It was an entirely different species. And I'm wildly obsessed with them right now. So
how does the, for people who are not in North America, who don't understand how the system works for being able to go and hunt those animals, how does the tag system work? How does that? Okay, this was a raffle, but like, how does the availability of those animals work?
Well, and admittedly, this is I'm still learning this because we were in Canada, which was different from the American wildlife management system. But as I understand it, the outfitters have these leases of places that they're allowed to hunt, and the outfitter that we were with, the Gaina River Outfitters, which by the way were amazing, have total control over what is underneath their, and in their lease. And so
is it owned by the government, but on like a 10-year lease or whatever by the outfitter?
This is where I need to learn, because I'm not positive it's owned by the government. It may be tribal.
Oh, okay. But it is a lease.
It is a lease.
Okay.
And the outfitter then has total control of the wildlife within the borders of that lease. And so he can choose how many tags and what it is. The government sets the price. The outfitter doesn't, but the outfitter chooses like how much. And so as we understand it, many of the outfits around us are outfits that give 40-something sheep tags. Gaina River gave 18. Like they're very conservative with it. And Harold Grindy, who's the outfitter with Gaina River, is this phenomenal man who's very much part of that space. And he asks, in the Northwest Territories, a legal ram is 3/4 curl. So a horn that goes around 3/4 of a circle. What Harold would like, rather than shooting the 3/4 curl, was shooting a 10 years or older ram, because that's sort of at the end of a sheep's lifespan. It's had ample time to be in its prime of breeding and to sort of spread its genetics and give back. And so he asked,
actually counting rings with the scope.
Oh yeah, very much counting
we
rings.
did that with tar, and it's if that's
crazy.
Your mindset, it's like, forget about the size.
Yeah.
Who gives a shit about the size?
It's the
How
age.
old is it?
Yeah.
Because that's what truly is important. So I love that.
And he asked that, and Bridget and I, and obviously like these are expensive hunts when they're not gifted. So people are paying a lot of money to be up there. And so if they don't get a sheep towards the end, I think they get a little more relaxed with it. But, Bridget and I, when we were up there, were very conscious of this being a gifted hunt, and wanted to follow those rules and make sure. And we ended up shooting a 12-year-old, which was really amazing. It wasn't the oldest sheep they took that
And
year.
it feels also, it's a very similar circumstance to the tar hunt that I did in New Zealand. And there, I mean, in New Zealand, as I've talked about on this podcast, I mean, they don't really give a shit about the animals there because they're all seen as pests. It's not like here in North America where they're, held in high esteem. But the outfitter that I was with had the same mindset. So even though we were on public land and anyone could come in there and do whatever the hell they liked there, because it wasn't even like he was leasing the block. We just flew in like anybody else could do. His thing was the age of old bull tars.
Yeah. And it's
because
so cool
just
when
like
you get
said,
that.
It's like the one that I shot probably wouldn't have made the rest of the winter because he was like skin and bones.
This one, he might have been through another winter in him, but he was old, and we had another 10-year-old ram taking that trip that a 15-year-old girl shot. She was amazing, and her sheep, the 10-year-old, had no teeth on his left side, like totally worn down, like not lost, like just totally smoothed down, and it was a really interesting skull to look at when everything was fleshed out. But where we were at, I think they said we were in the hundreds of miles from a road, and so this was like a place where technically, if you're a resident of the Northwest Territories, you could go hunt in there if you had a sheep tag.
Okay.
But
how do you get
But
there?
how do you get there? Yeah, and we flew into Norman Wells, Canada, in the Northwest Territories, and then we took a float plane for 45 minutes to base camp. And then base camp, I think, we were on a horseback hunt, so we rode horses on a pack string, and the first day was maybe 13 miles away from base camp, and then we just got progressively further and further away, and then we took a Super Cub back at the end of the hunt, and that was a 45-minute Super Cub flight to get to base camp, and then a 45-minute flight like on a float plane back to, quote unquote civilization, which is Norman Wells.
That's like, for people at home, that's basically like Edinburgh to London.
Yeah.
That's the same length of time you send the plane.
And the thing I kept saying, and I actually think we state this in the piece, is how quaint our American version of wild was. Because I'm in Wyoming. I grew up in Wyoming. I'm in this place that has the place with the least roads, and you can get the furthest from roads in the lower 48. We have Yellowstone National Park. I mean, Wyoming is the #wild, and a very rural state. And I was up in Canada going, wow, we had this wild. So wrong.
Yeah.
This is proper wild. Yeah. Oh, that was an eye opener, and it's not a critique of our wild in
it's just
Wyoming.
The reality of the place.
And it sure made you go realize how precious those last spaces were.
You haven't. This isn't a word that you've mentioned during this conversation, but the reason I'm going to bring it up is because it's very much a discussion that's happening at home right now, and the sort of the misunderstanding of what that means. I mean, you've been talking about selecting very old animals. And with sheep, that might mean that they're worn down, so they might have been slightly longer a couple of years before. But it's old animals with big headgear, which most people would say is a trophy
hunt,
right? But everything that you've explained so far, I would hope to even someone who doesn't come from the hunting space would understand why that's what you're selecting from what you've said. And yet at home, like we're having the discussion right now at a government level of completely banning trophy imports. Trophy in inverted commas import. They don't actually know what that means.
Well, I think that's always been Wyoming's even having that discussion of talking about what does trophy mean. Because I think that's our first problem, is that trophy has many, many different definitions, and it depends on who's using the word that it means something different. I think if you looked at strictly the definition of trophy hunting, I would absolutely fall under that, because I do hunt the older animals, and I don't do it for the headgear. They happen to have larger headgear most of the time, but it's because with a bow, the kind of hunting that I really love doing is finding an animal that knows its space and has been on the ground and is so wildly smart that it beats me most times. I like the fact that I come out of archery season having not shot something sometimes because I just had my tail handed to me by an old mule deer. But that hunt, and when you do connect, you've given that animal every chance to beat you. That animal has outsmarted you at just about every turn.
It defines fair chase.
And it defines fair chase for me. And sure, that means sometimes I don't get meat in the freezer, but I also get to spend 30 days outside in September, and that's never something that's bad.
Yeah.
But it does fall under trophy in the sense of like, I like to hunt the larger animals, but it's mainly because they've been around longer and they're far smarter on the ground.
Yeah, I think a lot of people's issue with it is what it means and the reasons why. Like, why are you after that animal? And the differences between like North America and Europe. These areas, but you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I wouldn't imagine they're not going up and culling a bunch of females in the.
No,
that doesn't exist. Whereas at home,
they do give out tags, but it's not it's not a culling practice.
It's not a culling practice. Okay, so it's not really population control.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Whereas at home, we're shooting shed loads of deer, mainly females, after the stag season or after the male season for population control. And
if you're shooting a female with a bow, you're a much better bow hunter than people that are shooting the big males, because big males are kind of dumb.
Yeah. It's the same as shooting stags. It's the same as shooting stags during the stag season.
When you're shooting them in mating season, you're like, I called you.
Yeah.
If you can shoot a cow elk or a female deer of any kind in any species with a bow, you had a hunt.
But the mindset as to why those are the kind of animals that are be taken by people who hunt, I don't think it doesn't translate well into Europe because people don't really understand it. But those are exactly the kind of animals that you would want to take up because they don't have much impact on the population. But then I suppose some people could argue that, okay, well, why don't you just leave them all alone?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that old animal will die next year, but that's nature.
Yeah, I mean...
Why do you need hunters in those spaces?
I mean, why do you need any predator? And it's not for management, it's for the wholeness of an ecosystem. And I think humanity has exempt ourselves from the laws of nature for so long. Like we're observers. We're observers. We're stewards of the land, which really drives me nuts. I think that removes our responsibility to be part of the land. And until we start seeing ourselves as part of the equation and not just as something that affects the equation, I think we're going to have this like separation issue. But like, you know, the reason that hunting works for me is not just like the time out. It's the only time in my life that I feel like I belong in a place. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm part of something, you know, you're part of a food chain and sometimes that means failure, like completing that food chain. But, you know, just as the coyote or the wolf sometimes misses their mark, so do hunters. And I think just seeing yourself in there as a predator, the good, the bad, and the ugly part of it, you know, hunting has a violence to it and it's not easy to like, I think as humans, we have the intellect to step outwardly of ourselves and look at that, and it makes it uncomfortable.
I think maybe tying into what the discussion that we started with is vested interest in landscape and species. In those places, if there wasn't people going up there to find sheep, who else is going to go there? And I mean, there's a lot of research and funding that goes in off the back of the hunting in these places that are the arse end of nowhere. Entirely as a result of people buying tags. Yeah,
I mean, it's builds a constituency of folk that will protect these places because they've fallen in love with the landscapes.
And they care if there was no sheep there. Whereas if there were no sheep there, what difference is that going to make to most people's lives? None, I would suggest.
And having been somebody that was kind of in that camp because it was so out of the realm of possibility for me to go, I didn't have... you know, a lot of my conservation work has been in Wyoming and around species that I see a lot. And I didn't have I wouldn't say I didn't care, but I didn't have a lot of emotion wrapped up into Dall sheep and this like, ooh, epic Dall sheep hunt kind of thing. I was
because it's like, so far removed.
And now having been there, you know, I'll be the first body to lie in front of a bulldozer if it goes that way, you know. Yeah, I mean, it does. It builds constituents, and whether it's sage grouse in Wyoming and hunters that are helping support the continuing of that species, or Dall sheep, it builds a love of something that I think otherwise wouldn't be there.
And what a contradictory statement that seems to so many people.
I think it's one of my favorite things of talking about hunting when folks are like, how can you love something and kill it? And I think it's a connection to our food is I don't want to kill something that I don't have mega respect and care for. You know,
that's how most of us live our lives.
Yeah.
Because we don't think you shovel it in.
Exactly.
It's fuel for the day. Who cares where it came from?
and you start thinking, whether it's agriculture and its impact on wildlife, or it's, the beef industry, which, can be done right, but often isn't, or it's, even those of us that don't eat meat have an impact, and we
still have blood on it.
Yeah, there's always going to be, you're always displacing something. To live is to consume, and to consume is to kill something. And it just is the degree of separation that you're comfortable with. And it's okay if you're not comfortable with hunting. I think I don't want everybody to hunt. And they don't all have to be comfortable with hunting, but they do have to understand that it's not and we set ourselves up for failure by calling it a sport.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But it's not. It's a
because of what people define as sport, or what's in their mindset.
They're like,
as
games and trophies.
Games and
trophies.
fun. Right. Well, I mean, it is fun, but it's
it's hard to say. It is fun, but it's life. I think it's because living is fun, and being able to talk about the degree of separation you're comfortable with. I would say more often than not, hunters have more in common with people that choose not to eat meat than
I totally agree with that.
Do.
Yeah, we've talked about that before, Tyler.
Yeah, we've had plenty
because it's people actually considering their impact.
Yeah,
or whether you agree with it or not, people are considering it more.
It's a choice. It's a deliberate choice of I'm going to eat this way because I want to either know about where it's coming from, or I want to have a relationship to that, or I definitely don't want to do that. And we've had a lot of vegans we've had conversations with where they've said,
which I feel like we should just use that as the common ground forward. We so focus on how we go about it. Oh, you're different than me, rather than being like, hey, but we actually think very similarly.
Yeah,
that's true. What in your work? What is the big challenges that you're facing right now? What's the number one thing on your desk that's giving you grief, that you're fighting and trying to work out what the way forward is?
Everything.
Or is the list too long? You're dealing with a lot of stuff, and even from what I read, and I don't see half the stuff that's actually going on in North America. Whether it be changing legislation for protecting wildlife, or the public land debate, which has been going on for the last couple of years. There seems to be a lot of fires burning with regard to the protection of wildlife.
I guess I can maybe narrow it down to three. One being an actual, what I am working on is the migration corridors, and that looking at how to protect this incredible thing that we have in Wyoming. And we're working on all the different politics that are going into that, and all the different opinions that are at the table right now, trying to find a way forward without having to piss anybody off royally, I guess, to put it bluntly. That, the migration corridors is a big thing that Wyoming Wildlife Federation has on the forefront, as is the wildlife crossings. So finding funding for to stop hitting deer on the road. And then I think the other two are a little more higher level, where it's just always occupying my brain. And that is the role that hunting is occupying in the space of the American public on the scale that we work on, but overall, maybe the global public, is hunting has represented itself very poorly in its history, and it has a bad rap, and it's been earned. It's not, it's not a rap that it we had folks that earned it.
And you know what? I want you to carry on that, but it's so important to take ownership of that.
Yeah.
Because that is why Tyler and the team are doing what they're doing now, is to correct some of that.
And that was, my thought process has always been that we have let the bad apples speak for us. Of course we have a bad rap, and we don't call out our own when they are doing things that are not okay, and we don't police our own. And it's hard to do, because to call out your friends is far harder than to call out your enemies. But we have focused on the wrong part of the story, and we've let, I always say that a photo is worth 1,000 words, but in the case of hunting, 1,000 words is not enough to talk about why you killed something. And so we have these quote unquote grip and grins that come out, and to someone that has never hunted, never been around wildlife, and doesn't understand what's going into that, this is a horrifying and bloody picture of Bambi, of a sweet little deer. And to not be able to explain that, and the fact that social media is in front of everyone, you can't just leave that as an explanation for what you're doing. And because hunting is dealing with life and death, because it's visceral and often perceived as violent, we are under a microscope, and we haven't behaved like we've been under a microscope. And every one of us is an ambassadar. And so when we
whether we like it or not,
my thing that I would love is to be able to watch the hunting public realize this and not change their behavior, but to give it context, to tell your story around it more than just throw the photo up. Or if you do throw a picture up, understand that folks may not always understand where it is, and to not react in anger when they don't understand it and when they disagree. Hunters have been really good at closing the door in people's faces that I think that they could have had a good conversation with had they been open to it.
Screw you, man. It's my right to hunt.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm the first one.
It's a great comeback.
You're like, oh, this is exactly how you change things. Yeah. And then the third sort of higher level thing I think that's always occupying and in my brain space is exactly that. It's not your right to hunt. It's your privilege. And we don't behave like it's a privilege, like we can lose it. And hunters don't show up. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm the only paid staff member in the room, and there is not a hunter there, like defending anything, their resource, their quote unquote right, or anything in these management meetings that are open to the public and advertised as open to the public, and hunters aren't there. People that are non-hunters are often there, but hunters don't show up. And I would love to see hunters take some time out of their day and some ownership into that.
And I think that goes to something, which is that maybe it is more than just telling the right stories, because I would say in many cases now, and this is true in the fishing space as well, this is a conversation I had with a friend of mine just before coming here, is that I'm not sure whether a lot of people who partake in it actually care enough. They'd go about their sort of day-to-day business within this thing that they really enjoy, and probably enjoy for a lot of reasons that they probably haven't thought about fully. But they're not as concerned about the implications as they should be.
It's because we talk about it as a right. We talk about it as something we can't lose.
Yeah.
And I think we haven't impressed on folks that this, we absolutely can lose it, whether it's the actual ability to hunt, or it's just we're going to lose the resource and there will be nothing left to hunt. We have talked about it as this is our inalienable right that will never change, and it's always going to be like this, and screw you if you think differently. And it's so preciously fleeting. It's on a knife's edge.
Yeah, and we get asked that all the time about trying to communicate with non-hunters, and a lot of people of that mindset, hunters who think it's a right, they're like, well, why are you doing that? Why are you wasting your time?
Why are you pandering?
Because that's 70 to 80% of the population globally who doesn't hunt has a say in things, and they can be swayed one way or the other. Yeah, exactly. They are participating often more than, as you're saying, hunters are. And
some of the most contentious meetings I've sat in, Wyoming was tackling a grizzly bear hunt that was very contentious.
Yeah.
Maybe 4 hunters were in the room. Maybe 40 people
against
it.
And yet all the hunters had a voice online about it.
Yeah.
And they all had an opinion.
No one was else. It was paid staff members in the room, which is like, I'm effective as a paid staff member. It's more effective when somebody is your voter or your constituent and shows up in the States and says, I voted you in, you will listen to me, and this is what I want.
So this was the grizzly bears that they wanted to open up to be able to hunt 21 or whatever it was. And we've talked about that with the Bear Trust podcast.
Yeah.
That's an entirely other podcast.
Well, and one thing that, Simon Roosevelt always talks about, this idea, this whole phrase that's been used, hunting is conservation, right? And that a lot of people feel like they are conservationists because part of their tax goes to fund conservation, and that's enough.
But that tax.
Do you want to tell me if you made that voluntary, that those people would still do that?
That's just what I was going to say. Yeah. They don't have a choice in that.
Right. And so in that sense, right, where, I think that's part of the conversation that we're addressing and trying to change too, is that no, that's not enough. We need to be doing more, all of us. And whether that's, just like you wake up every day, maybe we all try to be better humans. There's the things we can do to be better. There's more things we can do. And sure, there's time restrictions, right? Or you have family.
And you do what you can do.
Right.
That's the thing, is you don't have to there's lots of things you can do. You don't have to, dedicate your entire life to this. I mean, that would be great if you did, but that's not what we're asking. We're asking for a little bit.
And what's important for what you do, especially with Artemis, is that y'all are a resource to tell people how they can do it, because I think that's a big problem.
People don't know how to.
Exactly. They have passion. They want to believe in something and they want to help. Like a lot of times,
how to be effective,
right? Like after hurricanes, right? There's always people don't know, because there are people out there that are swindling and taking money. It's hard to know which one is the right one or how you can help. And so in this case, being able to give people information is good.
Yeah, to be a clearinghouse has been, in the sense of whether it's teaching you how to be an advocate that is effective, and you can go into your decision makers and rant at them and not get anything done, or you can go in there and be strategic and treat them like a human and actually get something done. And it's amazing, like just teaching that, or teaching the weird decorum that has to happen around some of our politics. You have to say, yes, Mr. Chairman and committee members. And that's scary. It's built to be like very formal. And I totally get it when people are like intimidated by going and testifying in front of their decision makers, because it's intimidating and it's made to be like that.
Next time you go, you should wear that skunk hat.
You just walk in, not break eye contact the whole time.
For context, my brother has a skunk pelt that's turned into a hat.
I think we're going to have to take a picture of that.
Yeah, we'll have you guys
there was
post
many of us
stories.
rocking them last night.
Oh, before I don't know, before you close this out, I wanted to address the Bambi thing. I had a discovery the other day. Would we agree that most fawns are born in spring? Is that true?
I mean,
like
at
June.
Home, I would say it's closer to summer. Most of ours are sort of from
June
May.
is the time for fawns.
Right.
Yeah.
So and that's not hunting season, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Bambi, I'm in the interest of hunters and poachers. That was a poacher that shot Bambi's mom.
Not a hunter.
Because the Bambi story is here, right?
Yes.
In North America.
Yes. It was,
actually, the Bambi story is originally about it's a British story. It's this red stag, typically, which makes a lot of sense now when you watch it and you realize the weird elk white-tailed deer thing.
Yeah,
right.
so if it was a red deer, then everything's shut down. There's no season open.
Yeah. So here, same thing. So I'd like to make that distinction that there's all this hate about hunters killing Bambi's mom. That was a poacher, not a hunter.
Poacher.
Maybe we should make some memes.
Hey.
Like, this is a hunter, this is a poacher.
Yeah, just with like the seasons at the bottom of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna write Disney about it.
I mean, the other side of that is also like, what animal is Bambi? Because I think Bambi's a whitetail, but his dad is a red stag and his mom might be a mule deer, so I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
He was an orphan.
No one knew.
Progressive species story.
It was a cartoon.
It was a cartoon. Yeah, there was a lot wrong with Bambi on the...
I know that you got to get down the road because you don't live that close to where we're recording this. And it'd probably be nice if you were like back before dark.
Oh, I am going to get up.
Thank you so much for making the effort to come up and see us, because it was great to have everyone in the same room last night, even though I had to crash out early because I was still suffering from
It was
jet lag.
amazing. It's worth it. I knew Nicole and everybody, and Becca, I think, were the only two people I'd met before. But it was, I think, coming up and being surrounded by those folks last night and being here with you, Taylor.
It's empowering, and it gives you, because one of the things I find, and I have to admit, like in the last 6 months in particular, I mean, I've been away from home a lot. But in the last 6 months in particular, I've just been feeling really worn down. Like, because I've been involved in this kind of space and trying to articulate all the things that we've just been discussing in this podcast in a public forum for a couple of years, well, permanently for a couple of years, but actually for a decade. And it's kind of depressing because I don't feel like we make as much progress as the effort that goes in.
Conservation is a game of losses.
I was, exactly. But last night I was feeling, I'm listening to everybody talk, and I don't think I've ever stood in a room with so many female hunters in my life before.
That was awesome.
And it was fantastic. I was just, I loved listening to the enthusiasm of everyone in the room. I was like, okay. I'm feeling better again. Because I've been feeling really shit about it, like in the last 6 months. Like to the point where, I'm just like, I don't even know why I do this anymore, because what difference am I making? Yet this is everything I do now. And yet I don't feel sometimes that it's, worth the effort, which is a terrible way to think, but I'm sure there'll be people listening to this who have gone through periods feeling exactly the same.
Do you know the Edward Abbey quote about being the half-hearted fanatic?
No.
Oh. I don't
You're
know
about to change my life.
I'm about to change your life. I might have to pull it up though because it's a little bit of a paragraph
it's okay.
long.
We can look it up. Or Tyler's got his phone there.
It is one of those things where when I started working in conservation, I had a mentor who printed this out and put it on my desk, and it sits on my desk and it reminds me because it is so easy to get beat down around that. The quote is, "One final paragraph of advice. Do not burn yourselves out. Be as I am, a reluctant enthusiast, a part-time crusader, a half-hearted fanatic. Save the other half of yourselves and your lives for pleasure and adventure. It is not enough to fight for the land. It is even more important to enjoy it, while you can, while it's still here. So get out there and hunt and fish and mess around with your friends. Ramble out yonder and explore the forests, climb the mountains, bag the peaks, run the rivers. Breathe deep of that yet sweet and lucid air. Sit quietly for a while and contemplate the precious stillness, the lovely, mysterious, and awesome space. Enjoy yourselves. Keep your brain in your head and your head firmly attached to the body active and alive. And I promise you this much. I promise you this one sweet victory over our enemies, over those desk-bound men and women with their hearts in a safe deposit box and their eyes hypnotized by desk calculators. I promise you this, you will outlive the bastards."
And that is how we are going to finish the podcast. What a tremendous way to end. Thank you so much for taking the time. You have now changed my life.
Thank you. I'm glad I could share that.
Is that from Desert Solitaire?
I think so.
I have that book here.
Really?
Yeah,
I'm going to
peek through it. Yeah.
Okay, well, safe travels home.
Thank you.
And we're going to be speaking a lot in the next week because we've got a lot of work to do.
Yes,
Volume 4.
We'll be chatting.
Okay. Thank you once again for listening. You will be hearing from us in another 2 weeks where I will be bringing you yet another contributor to Volume 4 Modern Huntsman. It's another incredible interview, and the focus is going to be on spearfishing and ocean conservation. I'm really looking forward to bringing that to everybody. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to do an intro with my brother for that one or not. I haven't quite looked at the diary to work out if we're going to be home at exactly the same time. But very, very soon, we will both be back in our intros and outros and recording some new podcasts back at home. I know that I've already got 4 lined up for November back in the UK. So that's exciting. Don't forget to go and check us out on social media, Pace_Brothers on Instagram. That's where we're posting most of the ins and outs of what we are up to. And of course, we'd always like to hear from you. If you like a show, don't like a show, send us a message or shoot us an email. All the links are in the description for this podcast.